Spirit Talk Live with Scott Allan is for entertainment purposes only.
My dear friend, a wonderfully, wonderfully gifted medium. I've seen him in action. It would blow your minds wide open. He's just incredible.
Patrick from London, you are on the air. Welcome to the show.
I mean, this reading has meant more to me than anything. And I'm so grateful.
Hello, my friends. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Talk Live. My name is Scott Allan, our first show of May 2024, and I would like to welcome all of you to the show. Very excited to chat with you tonight about our guest. His name is Michael Hunter, and Michael was he was an acupuncturist for 25 years, but he'd been talking with spirits since he was just a little boy. These days, he connects his clients with their bloodline ancestors, which can be quite ancient, and helps them to heal their intergenerational trauma. So this is going to be a very, very interesting conversation. Our lines are open, as always, 775-264-SPIRIT or 775-264-7747, and it's scrolling right across the bottom of the screen. Feel free to log in, jump on, give us a call, chat with us. We would love to get your comments and questions as we go forth, and I'm sure you will have some. And I think Michael is going to do a little session with us. Thomas, nice seeing you, my friend. Good seeing you. Thomas Patrick Gormley from Connecticut. Nice seeing you. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Michael out because we just have an hour to go with. So I want to have a chance to chat with him today. I was going to do the notes through the veil, and I have to be honest, I had readings backed up right up until this session tonight, so I didn't have a chance to sort of tune in, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to do that for next week. So without further ado, Michael Hunter, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, good, Scott. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Yeah, you had emailed me a while ago and said, this is what I do, and I'd love to have you come on. And I really think it's such a good fit for the new format of the show, because what we do is, it's just what we do. It's all spirit. It's all mediumship.
Right.
But you mentioned that you have had your gift since you were little. You knew about it when you were little. Did you embrace it as a child, or did you sort of push it away?
I never didn't know to not embrace it. Like, it was always such a benign, more than benign, it was benevolent force in my life, the way the spirits spoke to me. They were with me all the time. They would tell me stories on the ceiling to help me fall asleep for my afternoon nap when I was in nursery school. I had long connection with the ancestors on my mother's side. It just was always totally normal. Never really talked much about it. I just thought everyone sort of had that. And then when I got to acupuncture school in my early 20s, I realized I might have a little more access than the average Joe.
And of course, acupuncture, it's a much more spiritual experience in a sense, at least in my experience that I've had with it. I've done it a couple of times, and it always felt like it's not like going to your doctor. It's not like going to your chiropractor. It's a very, very different experience. So you probably were right at home there as well.
Yeah, very much. Acupuncture comes from ancient China, tracking back about 12,000 years to a culture in China known as the Wu, which is where we get the term woo-woo.
Right.
And the Wu were a culture of tribal indigenous shamans, and they were heavy into magic and heavy into connecting with the spirits and with the ancestors and with the elementals. And acupuncture comes from that woo-woo culture. And so, I was totally at home in there.
Now, are you a hypnotherapist too, or no? Am I thinking of something else? No, you're not. You don't do hypnosis.
No.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about what you do. And we talked a little before the show, but I think this is where it gets really fascinating.
Yeah, so I connect people with the spirits of their dead ancestors, and primarily for the purpose of cleaning up the lineage between the ancient, well and wise and spiritually vibrant members of their family who are, can track back 5, 6, 7, 10, 12,000 years ago, and clear up the lineages between those ancient ones and the present. There's a lot of intergenerational trauma in lineages on the planet today. It's been a lot of human on human harms in the last 3,000 years. If you look at the historical record, things have really gone sideways for humans for about the last 3,000 years. And we see genocide and slavery and cultural decimation, the likes of which didn't exist in the historical record before 3,000 years ago. So from an intergenerational trauma standpoint, it's all backed up for the last 3,000 years. And what I do is what I do is connect people to their own innate psychic abilities, their own innate capacity to be in contact with the spirit world. And it's my contention that we all have the capacity, we all have the apparatus to be in contact with the unseen, to be in contact with the spirits. And in fact, our ancestors, tribal indigenous people who live in the old ways, to a person, are all in contact with the spirits of their ancestors. It's totally normal for that to be true. And at one time, for we as a species, it was totally normal for everybody in the tribe to have conversations with the spirits of the dead. And so the work that I'm doing is in large part like a recovery of skills that we used to possess as a species. And the way it looks, it's really like I provide the Wi-Fi network in the session. I invite the client to tap into that Wi-Fi. And sometimes it takes a little bit of doing, but after a few sessions, most people are getting a direct link to their ancestors, and I host the conversation.
So how did you know you could do that?
I just had so much direct spirit access myself that I was drawn to a particular teacher who really put structure around what I was experiencing, and led me toward working with the ancestors in a very structured way. My spirit access before direct ancestral access, I had direct ancestral access up my mother's father's lineage, but that was it. My other spirit access was all non-human spirits, primarily elementals. And that's who I trafficked with. And that's who I thought was, the whole populace of the unseen. And then I met this teacher, his name is Dr. Daniel Four, and he runs a program called ancestralmedicine.org, where he has created a very structured, ritualized procedure to connect with the spirits of the dead bloodline ancestors. And just hearing him talk, I knew that I needed to be in touch with him, and I reached out and started studying with him. And right away, my antenna, my ability to tune into the unseen was really nourished. And in a new way, like the structure of connecting to the bloodline ancestors, I realized, oh, wow, I have connection not just to my mother's father's people, but I have connection to all the people on all the bloodlines, mothers and fathers in all directions.
Now, do they relate? I mean, obviously, when we get messages from spirit, I'm sure it's very similar to what I get. I mean, it's not that they appear in the room and start talking to you in English. So, but is it easily... are you able to understand that? I mean, obviously they're from a different world, a different time. I mean, especially if they're ancient. What is that like? What is that like in terms of the information you get?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in this work, it's based heavily in ritual, and the rituals derive mostly from a recovery of pagan rituals. So ancient European pagan rituals, which we still have access to. And in these particular rituals, there's always an altar, and the altar has representations of the ancestors on it. And as we get contact with a particular ancestor, that ancestor will generally ask for representation on the altar, or will bring it up. Hey, how would you like to be represented on the altar? And the reason the altar is important, it becomes an externalization, a place where the communication can happen that's not inside my head. because initially it's inside my head, right? It's inside my lived kinesthetic experience, and parsing out whether that's my voice and my imagination or my ancestor's voice or a spirit's voice can sometimes be tricky. And so when we have an alter, an externalization of the relationship, it gives me a little bit of space and a little bit of distance to have a conversation where I know who's talking. And so the altar provides for me like the switchboard. So when I do work with clients, where I'm standing right now is where I do my work with clients, and my altar, I can reach out and touch it. It's just to my left. And so that's my physical sounding board. I have never done the work not in reach of my altar, because I need the external physicalization to hear them clearly. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I mean, it's almost like I'm very clairsentient. So if I'm doing a reading with someone and I'm feeling like there's something here in my belly, right? There's something here going on with whatever it is, my stomach, my liver, whatever. I have to sit and you have to really know who you are to know who you're not. And, that's the question I ask myself. Is this me? Is this my stomach that hurts? Is this my head that hurts? Or is this coming from spirit? And you have to really know who you are in order to know who you are not. And I'm sure this is very similar. The altar is it's just an altar, or is there equipment that you list? Do they come through like in sound, or is it just
No,
like external? It's just a altar.
It's just an altar. It's a glass top table with physical objects and a whole variety of different physical objects that represent each of the ancestors that are there. And now when I'm in front of the altar, I've been doing this work for a number of years. I get such profound kinesthetic movements in my body, and they'll actually move my body parts as I'm standing.
Really?
And yeah, I can feel them. It feels really gentle and benevolent and lovely to be with them, to drop into that space. So now it's totally unmistakable, but I've never really done it without the altar. If I'm connecting with an elemental, like the spirit of water, for example, I live near a lake, and I can go sit by the lake and drop in with the spirit of water and have the same kinesthetic experience where I'm being moved by the water itself. But again, it's an externalization. I'm sitting in front of the lake, and it's the spirit of the lake that's actually moving me, that I can feel in my body, that's moving me.
Incredible. And I love that physical sensation, because that gives you some of the validation you need. You're not connecting with a person. If I did a reading for you, you could validate, that sounds like my so-and-so, my grandmother, my grandfather. You can't do that with these, with the sessions that you're doing. So you need to feel it a different way to understand that you're getting the validation. And I think one of the things that really fascinates me too is that, you talk about guides being non-human, being elementals.
Right.
That is so totally opposite to what I've always thought. I always thought that a guide was, a spirit that had lived here and is contracted with you to come and keep you, I don't think of them in terms of non-humans. How did you discover that?
Chinese medicine gave me that verbiage. There's a concept in Chinese medicine that every human, when they take their first breath, is attended to by a host of non-human guides. The most prominent and primary is the spirit of water. We're born into amniotic fluid, and our bodies are, most of us have heard the statistic that we're about 70% water by volume. But the more interesting statistic is actually that we're 99.95% water by molecule count. So we're actually water beings. And so water as a spirit guide in Chinese medicine, they say the spirit of water attends every human from first breath to last. That's why you see so much water imagery in Taoism. They're constantly referring to water in this very mystical sense, because our relationship with water is so intimate. So that's the first spirit guide that I connect clients with. But all the elementals count as relevant guides.
Yeah, that to me is fascinating. And so if someone calls you and says, I need to have a session with you, is it a session or is it usually a series of sessions that you need to have to get what you're looking for?
It's always a series.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a series. I usually work with people for 6 months to a year.
See, I would think that too. It's not,
Yeah.
with me, they come in, they connect with their loved one and they know they're okay and they move on. But
Right.
you're doing healing, throughout all of this. You're healing this trauma.
Yeah, and as importantly, teaching clients to be in contact with their ancestors and with the broader field of relational intimacy that is the spirit world that is available to us, teaching them to do that on their own. So encouraging them and teaching them how to build an altar, how to have this externalization experience, teaching them the rituals that have them drop into the space that gets them in contact with these spirits, and just awakening in them their own innate psychic capacities so that
Mhm.
when they're done working with me after a year, they are themselves self-identified with psychic abilities that they use on a regular basis to be in contact with
Wow.
all the spirits that we met over that year, and those relationships can deepen and deepen and deepen.
And I would think, Michael, too, that if you have someone that's seeking out your services, what you do, they're a special kind of person. They're open to that. They're open to that, to the energy and the spirit. It's not, you're not going to get too many skeptics that are going to come and sit with you for a year. So a lot of
Not
people
too
can
many.
block
Yeah.
themselves off, so you're people, you're lined up with people who are already fascinated by this and interested in it and
Yeah.
and accepting of it, which really I think is half the battle. It's I do readings with anyone, but I can notice a huge difference with people who are spiritually connected and people who are
Mhm.
not. It's
Right.
just night and day, night and day.
Right.
So what does a session look like? A first session, someone will come to you and what is that? What is that about? What happens?
So in the very first session, the way I work is connecting people with a non-human spirit guide. It's very often the spirit of water, but a lot of times people will come in and you're correct in assuming that the people that are attracted to me are generally a spiritually oriented group to begin with. So a lot of people that come to me already show up with an affinity with a non-human spirit guide. So they might have an affinity with the spirit of the bear or something, or the spirit of a tree. They might have an affinity with oak trees, or with a particular body of water, like a river that's flowing past their house or something. They might have some knowledge that on the spiritual plane they're connected with that being. Um, at any rate, we anchor the spirit connection, whatever the connection with their primary spirit guide, we anchor in the first session. And the purpose for that is it has an agenda, and the agenda is protection. Because when we then turn toward ancestral lines that are in trouble, so ancestral lineages that have suffered intergenerational trauma for 2,000 years, there's generally a lot of unwell dead on those lines. There's some people that had a lot of work left to do, maybe died in horrible ways. And those are not spirits that we generally want to be hanging around without larger benevolent forces on the scene. And
Sure.
that's the purpose of the non-human spirit guides. And I lean into non-human spirit guides really specifically because they lack any of the complexity and drama that human relationships often bring.
Uh,
It's just like, so many of us have experiences with relating to our pets, like dogs and cats. The relationship is so direct and so drama free and so without complexity. It's just benevolent and loving. And the same is true when you relate to a non-human guide, like a tree spirit or a river spirit. It's benevolent, loving, trustable, reliable, and it lacks that complexity and drama that can come with human interactions, and especially family interactions.
and that's a great analogy, using your pet, because that's all it is. It's your pet is just love. They love you no matter
Yeah.
what. And you don't get
Yeah.
all of the other stuff that goes along with it. So that's perfect. We
Yeah.
had talked before the show about doing some of that, a little bit of that to connect with, a guide. How long does that take? Is that a long process or
No, it's pretty quick. Yeah,
really?
it's pretty quick.
Could we try a little and so people get an idea of what
Yeah.
this is? And
Yeah,
yeah.
and people listening can fully participate and go along, and not everyone can receive it and go along with it. It's like I said before the show. It's a really prosaic process. Like, it's really plain Jane. It's not
Mhm.
magical or spooky at all. Like, the cool spooky magical stuff happens later on down the line, but
Yep.
initially connecting is just turning toward an orientation uh, that transforms what's already an intimacy. So we already have these intimacies with, like, the spirit of water. I keep talking about that because it's the one I lean into the most. We already have a great intimacy with the spirit of water. We were born into amniotic fluid. We're mostly water. And any one of us can imagine ourselves standing on a beach with the pounding surf and being moved by that in a really unique way. Like, we know what it feels like to stand on the beach and observe the pounding surf,
Right.
or to stand in the middle of a raging thunderstorm. What does it feel like to be undercover, but to be in the midst of a raging thunderstorm, or to be in the complete utter silence of a heavy snowfall? Like, all of these different ways that water kinesthetically impacts us in a really unique way. We're so intimate with it and so comfortable being in those experiences that we take for granted the fact that, whoa, 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 that is a transcendent spiritual experience happening right there. And we've just had it so many times that we're not used to identifying it as such. And so the reorientation is just turning toward that experience of standing on the beach. The waves are impacting my body. I can feel my body being moved by the energy of the waves. I'm not standing in the waves, but I can feel the sensation of being on the beach. And that's a spiritual experience with an elemental right there. I'm being communicated to by this massive elemental who's way above my pay grade. This is a gigantic, benevolent spirit that is incorporating me and including me in its experience. And allowing that in and staying with that recognition, not getting back to my worried thoughts, but staying with that and staying with that and staying with that, and beginning to relate to the ocean or to the river or to the thunderstorm, literally beginning to have a voice and participate in a conversation, and suspending my disbelief enough to go, hey, maybe if I just put my hand on my heart and say, hi, my name's Michael. It's really nice to be here with you. And just see what develops from there. And that's where the spooky stuff starts to happen.
I was just going to ask you, what is the spooky stuff? And that's, what is the spooky stuff that takes place?
For me and for many people, so we start with this kinesthetic experience, right? We're on the beach, the waves are pounding. We're having this, whoa, yeah, the waves always make me feel interesting in this deeper way. And then we're staying with it. And then we're having a voice, hand on heart, like, hey, my name is Michael. I'm honored to be here with you. I'm honored to be included in your experience. And then allowing that kinesthetic experience to deepen, and allowing it to deepen and participate even more. What, I can feel you moving me. I can feel you. I can feel you. And having a voice back and forth with the waves, so you're actually in conversation with them. It takes practice. And for me, it takes no time at all. Like I was talking about before the show, there's a lake near my house. I go sit there all the time and have conversations with the spirit of this lake, and I'm moved, and actually moves my limbs in a really sort of gentle, beautiful, benevolent way. I can almost like an invisible wind, and it talks to me in that way. And then I take water interaction a step further, and I do frozen water technique, where I take lake water or any kind of water, but I talk to the lake a lot. So I grab a jar of the water from the lake, and I come home and I put it in a petri dish, like about a tablespoon of it. And I put it in a freezer, which is just beside my altar, tiny little 1 cubic foot freezer. before I put it in there, I hold the petri dish in my hand and I intend something into it. I need help with something. I need recognition about something, or I'm just having some gratitude for you. I want to hear from you. And then I freeze the petri dish with the water. And the way the ice crystals form will be a picture. And it's alarming how different the picture is every single time it comes out. And it is 100% of the time relevant to the thing I intended. It will
So
have
you make
some relevance.
sense of it. You make sense of it.
Yeah, I read it. And sometimes it is so readable that I could tell you what I intended and show you the picture, and you would go, "Oh my goodness, the water's
Really?
talking back." Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And this
And
is
that's
not a
something anybody
technique.
can try. Anybody
Something
can do
anyone
that.
can do, and it's not a technique that I made up. There was a Japanese water researcher 25 years ago named Masaru Emoto, who wrote a New York Times best-selling book called The Messages in Water, where he developed this technique where he realized you could prompt water with words like love, and it would send back these beautiful ice crystals, or hate, and it would send back these jagged, ugly, chaotic ice crystals. And he wrote this book. I mean, I got it right here. The Hidden Messages in Water. And it was a New York Times bestseller because he's got these amazing pictures in there.
Who was that by again? Can you say that one more time just so people watching?
Masaru Emoto.
Masaru Emoto. Yes. Messages in Water.
Dr. Emoto. So that's his technique, and lots of people have extrapolated on it over the years. And I started using it about a year ago, and it's astounding. It's full on spooky, cool. You're talking to water, and you can have a back and forth every 15 minutes, depending on how cold your freezer is.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I always thought of elementals as tricksters, playful kind of things that just, I don't know if they're not good, they're not bad, they're just tricksters is what that was the impression that I had of it, but not that they would communicate and show this type of a, communication.
Yeah, I've heard of those angles on elementals that they can be tricksters. That's not the tradition I come from, so I never really experienced them that way.
Yeah.
In Chinese medicine, they're completely benevolent, higher order beings, and they look after us, and so that's how I've always experienced them. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that is great. That is great. You're not still doing acupuncture, or you're moved from that?
No. Yeah, I moved from that. I do run a sleep program, an online sleep program, which uses a lot of Chinese medicine and doesn't really lean into the spooky side of things. But I also do this ancestral work.
This is great. This is great. So can we do that so people get a chance to see what it is, and then we can talk about it on the other side?
Yeah. So just full transparency, we've pretty much done it. The only thing we didn't do was drop into a liminal space, which I usually talk people into, just a more settled, embodied place before we start talking about, hey, imagine yourself on a beach. So we've done a lot of the nuts and bolts of it already. And it's like I was saying earlier, the really cool, unmistakably spiritual aspects of the experience tend to be later on. The initial meeting is this very prosaic, very plain Jane, like, oh, I've been experiencing that all along. And now you're telling me to recognize that as a spiritual experience. All right, I'll suspend my disbelief and I'll go along with that. Sure. That's the first meeting. And then it's really about, being self-responsible in a relationship. Like you'd be in a relationship with any new acquaintance, like someone you met at a party, you'd be self-responsible and follow the right etiquette. Same thing with meeting a new spirit. You be self-responsible, you follow the right etiquette, you hold up your end of the conversation.
Sure. Fascinating. I think it's great. You doing this pretty much online though, right? Not in person. I mean, so people could get a hold of you from anywhere.
Yeah, I only do it online.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So, people that are interested in this kind of thing, and we want to talk about that before we close the show out. We still have some time left, but I want to make sure they know how to reach you and get in
Yes.
touch with you.
So it would be my website, which is ancestorhealingarts.org.
Ancestorhealingarts.org. Ancestor Healing. I'm writing it down because I want to put it in the description.org.
Yeah.
There we go. Perfect.
So then
Ancestorhealingarts.org.
the second step from there is we start to reach out to bloodline ancestors, and we get in touch with human spirit guides, and start to bring real healing to families. So the non-human spirit guide is just there to get a high pay grade being on the scene to keep the family drama and complexity under control.
How does the healing take place? So, the spirit guides are not the ancestors. Are you saying the ancestors are the spirit guides?
Yeah, the ancestors that we get in contact with are ancestral spirit guides. So we reach far enough back in time to find really spiritually vibrant individuals who can represent the health of the bloodline before them. With the assumption being that far enough back on any bloodline, you're tapping into tribal indigenous people who lived really close to the earth, and who had a lot less experience of human on human harms, and had a lot less experience of the kind of traumas that we're used to witnessing between humans nowadays on the planet. There was a time before that stuff wasn't happening to the extent that it happens today, the genocides and the like. And so those people who lived then lived and died much better than we're doing today.
I just want to say too, at this point in the show, please, if you have a question for Michael, drop it in the chat here or give us a call, 775-264-SPIRIT. If you want to join the show and talk about this and have your questions answered, we'd love to chat with you. So feel free to go into the chat and we'll try to answer your questions for you. Michael, you have been doing this how long?
I've been doing this direct ancestor work now for 3 years.
Did you do that when you were on the West Coast as well?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Did you find, and this is, did you find that it was more, I don't want to say accepted, but I feel like the West Coast is very different than the South, East Coast.
I've always worked online, so
you don't notice it. Yeah, it's the same.
I don't really notice. Yeah, I've got clients in Europe. I've got clients in Australia. I've got clients here. So yeah, I never noticed where they're coming from.
That's great. So, if someone is going to book a session with you, they should be prepared for what in terms of it's the first session just kind of like, let's see if this is for me, or is it we're committed for a year or whatever going forward?
No one's ever committed for any amount of time. So if any session could be the last. And the first session for a lot of people, it's their first experience of the unseen, of the spirit domain. Like you pointed out, they're going to have some curiosity to even be attracted to the work that I do. But the initial sessions are a lot about suspension of disbelief. And I invite that. I say, hey, you don't have to believe in this. You don't have to believe that any of this is real. But if you behave as if it's real, suspend your disbelief, behave as if it's real, approach these beings that I'm talking about, that I can feel and I know are there, approach them with the right etiquette, and I'll give you what that etiquette is. Then see how your life changes. See if you start having an experience of them. Really see how your life changes, because that's the impact of being in touch with these larger powers and this larger network of relational intimacy that is the unseen, is that our lives start to up level, like start to spiral up. So I say, notice that, like notice the quantity of synchronicities in your life. Notice, does it seem like someone's trying to talk to you, that you're getting signs from the spirit world? And You can come in with as much disbelief as you want. You can be completely
Right.
skeptical if you want. Um, but if you have a spark of curiosity, you want to see if this works, you don't have to believe for it to work. Um, you can come in and just suspend the disbelief and take a look at your life and then make a decision.
And make a decision. There it is. But they're not going to expect that they're going to have the full benefit in one session. I guess that's I probably didn't word it correctly. They need to understand that if they have this trauma that is, intergenerational, it's not going to be fixed typically in 30 or 60 minutes. It takes time. These things take time.
It takes time, yeah. The lineage healing, which is what the work really is blood
Mhm.
lineage healing. So we're healing lineages. We're not healing clients, which
Ah,
makes the work differ from a lot of work that people can have either with spiritual readings or in therapy. They're the client and they're the one receiving the healing. In this work, it's the lineage that's receiving the healing, and the client happens to be a member of the lineage. And so
mhm.
they do get the work, but only as part of a collective. We're calling down collective level healing. So we're calling down healing energy from the broader collective in the ancient past of these lineages to
Mhm.
come down and bring their ancient magic into the more recent past and heal up those spirits who are in need of some help further down on the lineage.
And
Um,
would you say this helps the line going forward, the generations to
yes,
come?
it absolutely does. Yeah. So what we see when people really tend to these lineages and spend the whole year and really tend to lineages on both sides, mother's and father's side, and call down the healing, this collective healing from the ancient well and wise ancestors. What we see is relationships with living family improve across the board,
Oh,
and we don't set that up as a goal. Right. The goal is to heal the lineages of the spirits. But what we see as an ancillary effect, a follow-on effect, is invariably relationships with living family improve. So estrangements get healed. Old wounds seem to go away. We also see the children of clients not receiving the intergenerational trauma. So they're not exhibiting the same symptomology of family distress that the people who are doing the healing have experienced in their lives. So it puts an end to it.
so this is kind of a hypothetical, but I'm sure it happens. If you have, okay, so I adopted my son. My son is adopted.
Yeah,
You don't always know, a lot of times when children are adopted, they come from situations where there is trauma. He didn't
sure.
experience any trauma, but generationally, you might be able to look back and see that there was stuff.
Right.
Does the person have to be an active participant, or could you do it for the benefit of somebody else? In other words, could a parent do it for the benefit of their child?
Yeah. So there's some rules we follow around that. And if the child is under the age of 18, if so they're not an adult, then the answer is yes. The parent can do this work on their behalf. If the person's over 18, we like to get their permission. Hey, we want to do this work on your behalf. You don't have to do anything, but I'd like to drop in and be in contact with your people. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then go ahead.
Have you noticed changes in people who are not active participants? In other words, their life improves. In other words, if you did this for someone else that gave you permission, sure, knock yourself out, and you go, we went in and did that. Have you noticed changes in their life because of it?
I have never done the work on behalf of someone else. I've just
Understood.
in
Yep.
the circles that I'm with, there are practitioners that do and have had that experience,
Mhm.
and so I'm aware of what the protocols are around that in these circles, and I've just never done it, never come across it.
So that brings me to my next question. So you're not alone. There are others that are doing this work.
There's a
Yes.
network of us, yeah, at ancestralmedicine.org, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Really and truly. I just want to bring up a question here, and I don't know that it necessarily relates 100%, but Thomas is saying, do we feel we can connect to the spirit of animals, wildlife, and or pets? I know that I can. I don't necessarily communicate with them and receive messages, but I do connect with spirits, excuse me, of animals in sessions all the time. How would that, if at all, relate to what you do, Michael?
Oh, it's front and center. Yeah. The answer is a resounding yes. The spirits of animals are often the spirit guides that are on the scene that attend to the protective function necessary for safe operation around the complexities and drama of family connections. So it's often an elemental and often a family, a animal affinity spirit. We tend to call them affinity spirits. A lot of these ancient lines had affinities with animals and plants. So, you'll come across Celtic tree people or Celtic crow people, or I'm Celtic, so I know a lot about the Celtic lineages. But yeah, so there's family affinities with animals and plants, and the across cultures, not just the Celts, but across cultures, you see affinities in the ancient peoples, and you see it. Native American peoples also talk about we're deer people or we're Sequoia people, or so you hear about these affinities in tribal indigenous peoples frequently. It's a common thing, and those spirits are actually attendant spirits in this work. So, yeah, do we feel we can connect to the spirits of animals, wildlife, and pets? 100%.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't obviously connect with them in the same way that you do, but I was doing an event not that long ago. I had a room full of people and I said, folks, there's a horse here. There's a horse here. He just came in and sat down right next to this person who was in the room, and everybody's looking at me like, there's a horse in the room. Yeah. And this guy said, yeah, I had a horse. He's like right next to you, right next to you. I get goosebumps because it's crazy,
Wow.
crazy, but so fascinating, that
Yeah.
we're able to pick up on these things. And I'll never forget, growing up, I went to Catholic school my whole life. My parents sent me off, and I remember the clergy saying, animals don't go to heaven. They don't have a soul. And I thought, really? I mean, come on. Then I don't want to be there, because I don't think it's a very happy place. And I know for a fact that's not true because I've experienced it. So I think it's so fascinating, that you're able to connect with them. This here. Anybody else? Oh, let's see. What is he saying here? The animals always amaze me. Shaman medicine for all. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's great, just really fascinating. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to hop in the chat. We have a few minutes left. And I certainly want to give Michael a chance to, once again, to let us know. I know you said it is ancestry healing art. It's art, singular, right? Ancestor healing art. Ancestorhealingart.org. Healing Arts.
Healing Arts, yeah.
Yep, ancestorhealingarts.org if you want to find out what Michael's all about, now that you're fascinated, because I certainly am. And really, it's just when you emailed me about this, I had no idea what any of this was. And, I'm sort of in the community, so to speak, but down the street, I don't really know, and the fact that you do this is just absolutely, absolutely fascinating. And I think people are going to be more, would you say too, because I don't know, I think that we are at a time in the world where people are looking for healing. They're looking in more spiritual places to find answers, and they're becoming more connected. I've noticed that just myself over the last maybe 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. I've noticed people are reaching for something. They seem to be more spiritually connected than ever before.
I think so too. Yeah. And like we were saying before the call, this is really a recovery project for me, a recovery of a skill set that we as a species used to possess en masse. Like all humans at one time had this access to the unseen, to the
Mhm.
spirits. So it was a regular thing to be in conversation with the spirits, with the elementals, with the ancestors. And we lost it. We lost it over cultural decimation that has been occurring over the last 2,000 years. You know, the sweep of Christianity and the other Abrahamic
Sure.
religions across the planet have decimated the old ways, the old pagan ways, the animistic ways, the shamanistic ways that had us be in direct communion with the spirit world. And at one time, all humans had an easy connection with the unseen. And it was just widely held that this material reality has an unseen complement at every step of the way, and that's been lost. And this is a recovery project. It's a recovery to turn people back on,
To
to get
turn
people,
people back on.
yeah, to get them reconnected to the Wi-Fi, so to speak. Like the Wi-Fi has been on all this time, and most people most people are in airplane mode. Come out of airplane mode,
Right.
people, and you can connect.
So I've heard of people saying, I can help you turn on your third eye. In a sense, you're doing that to a certain degree. You're helping them
Yeah.
become more aware of what's around them and that they can connect.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned a part of the anatomy, the third eye, because the part of the anatomy that we use that's the most readily available is it's like a radio tuner, is the heart. The heart as a physical organ generates a huge electromagnetic field, and it
Mhm.
not only transmits but it also receives. So the heart has a huge amount of neural tissue in it. It's like a small brain, and it communicates with the rest of the body through electromagnetic signals. And it is the part of the anatomy that is, when we focus there, is the easiest for us to feel the unseen. So when I'm dropping into session with people, that's where I'm coming from, is I'm actually focused on the physical anatomy of my heart, um, to
Wow.
be in that dropped in place in that conversation. I coach clients to do the same. Like, hey, you could really facilitate this process of talking to the spirits by not talking from your head, not having your attention in your head, but actually
Mhm.
dropping your attention into your heart. It's a very physical process. You could do it right now. Just drop your attention into your heart, and you breathe as if the breath is coming into and out of your heart. And as you do that, your awareness shifts,
Mhm.
and that's the dropped in place. And I don't know how you do your work and how you access that. And I'm guessing you're not tapped in and tuned in all the time, because it would be kind of
No.
hazy.
Well, I was until I learned to control it, and now I'm
Yeah,
pretty much
yeah,
out unless I'm in. But
right.
you talked about your heart, and I do try to bring awareness everywhere other than my brain, because
Mhm.
uh, if I'm in my brain, then I'm thinking, and when I'm thinking, I'm always wrong. It's not about that. You have to channel the information. It has to just flow through you.
Yeah,
And I am very well aware of, from the bottoms of my feet to the top of my head. And I have to get in that place where I'm not in my head in order to get the messages that I get. And then the information starts flowing. You'll start feeling it and seeing it.
yeah,
And sometimes
yeah,
it's that you just kind of know. It's put in your
yeah,
head and you just know. And I don't
yep.
know if that's how it manifests for you as well. There is some physical sensation along with it. Um, I don't necessarily feel the ebb and flow of the tide per se, but I do feel sometimes it's emotion. Sometimes
Mhm,
it's
mhm.
it's it's physical. Like I know they're bringing my attention, as an example, to my legs from the knee down. I know I have
Yeah,
circulatory issues there, and you just know it. It's not that I necessarily feel pain, but, oh, no, they're showing me right here, right below the knee.
right,
Very, very
right.
strange. I wanna say
Yeah.
hello here, Elizabeth Lee Crowther. So, I don't know if I told you, we are live in the UK right now, not
All
just here,
right.
but we're live on Pulse Talk Radio in the UK. UK. Elizabeth is a pet psychic from the UK, and she's scheduled on my show
Cool.
one day this summer, so we're gonna be doing pet readings over
Right
the summer
on.
with Beth. But thank you for saying
Cool.
hello. And I don't know why she's up at this ungodly hour in the UK, but I think she's an all-nighter. She said, I asked her, I said, "Are you sure you're gonna be able to do this?" She's, "Oh yeah." I'm like, "I'm up all night." Yeah. So that's kind of how it works for me. And it's so subtle. It wasn't subtle at the beginning. It wasn't subtle at first. It was in my face. And it has shifted over time. I don't know if what you experience has shifted. It's become more clear, it's become more fine-tuned, and the information is more accurate. I'm now getting names and crazy stuff. You know what I mean? Like that. Like, how am I getting somebody's name? You know?
Right.
I didn't used to get that, but it comes to me very differently, and it's very, very, very accurate, but very, very subtle.
Yeah, it's definitely coming to me stronger and stronger over the years. Once got the structure 3 years ago of this ancestor work, it really organized my access in a way that has propelled it forward. Um, Before, I was much more a passive participant, from
Mhm.
childhood, even through practicing acupuncture. I was pretty passive with my participation, just constantly in receiving mode. And when I started doing this very structured ancestor work 3 years ago, um, it compelled me to take a much more active role, and my active role necessitated a back and forth with the spirits. And now when they speak to me, it's getting more and more kinesthetic. It's I was going to say louder, but it's not louder. It's just clearer, and
Mhm.
there's more there's more oomph to it. um I pray in front of my altar each morning. I pray is probably the wrong word. It's more like greeting
Mhm.
my people every morning, just sort of welcoming them, and like I would with my flesh and blood family. But um,
Sure.
I do spend a few minutes each morning welcoming my connection with my spirits and my family of spirits. And nowadays, when I get there, it's like they clobber me, like, with love, but it's like kind of
Yeah.
bowls me over. I was like, whoa,
You
and I can
feel it.
really,
You
really
feel
feel,
it.
yeah, really feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a term we use in what I do, and it's called blending with spirit, where it's
Uh-huh.
almost as if it's not possession. So I don't want anybody to think it's possession, but it's like they share the same space with you. And sometimes
Yeah.
when you're truly blended, you just know. I know what my name is, my name, their name. I know what their name is. I know what I
Yeah.
did for work. I know that my eyes were brown and that was a little overweight. And you can tell whether you're a man or a woman, and it sits
Mm-hmm.
right on top of you. And
Yeah.
that's that's what so those are the physical kind of things that I will sometimes feel. And I will also get, we call it the tell, when we're connecting, and they want to let me know that we got it right, because it's a game of Pictionary most of the time. And
Right.
I get it. And it's this weird kind of vibration up and down my arm and my legs. And sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
swirling, depending on how intense they want to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's different. And I feel we all get it different. Even, someone else who does exactly what I do will get it differently.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
it's there. But it's there.
It's there. Yeah.
And you learn
It's
to
funny
recognize what it is.
yeah. You get intimate with it. Yeah. You said the word possession, and in Chinese medicine, the word possession is not a bad word at all. We've been conditioned in our culture, like, oh no,
Mhm.
it's not possession. Let's not talk about that. It's not The Exorcist here. But in Chinese medicine, possession is a spectrum from everything from the exorcist level stuff, but all the way down to, hey, you kind of caught a cold. Like, there's a little energy that you picked up. You're possessed by a little
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
And brings up an interesting topic, which is my whole entry into all of this work was through the world of acting. I was a
Oh.
professional actor in my teens and 20s, and acting is an intentional possession. Method
Sure.
acting is an invited intentional possession. And if we look at the history of acting, the tradition of acting that we know as movies and theater today comes from ancient Greek theater. And in ancient Greek theater, acting was mysticism. Dionysus, the god of mysticism and wine in ancient Greece, was also the god of theater. And acting is a mystical sport. It's inviting the spirit, the identity structure of a spirit to come take possession of your body. And I had deeply mystical experiences on stage as a kid. And if you look at some of the method actors, the famous ones like, Robert De Niro will famously take on a role and maybe that character has a limp, and for 3 weeks after they're done shooting, he's still limping around because he's still possessed by that character. So that identity structure he's still in a possessed state.
I could relate to that because for 25 years I did regional theater. I haven't done it in quite a while, but I remember being sick as a dog, standing in the wings, and as soon as you step out on stage, it's gone because
Right.
the character you're portraying does not have that cold or that whatever it is that
Exactly.
you had, doesn't
Yeah,
have that
exactly.
limp, doesn't have that feeling, and you really do become them. It's almost as if there is no fourth wall. That the audience doesn't exist anymore. You're just living that
Yeah.
reality, and I think
Yeah.
it's very, very similar to what we do when I do my work here. As a medium,
Yeah.
I know when I'm in the zone. When I'm not, it won't work. But once
Right.
I step in, especially I notice it when I'm doing a public demonstration of mediumship. And just a quick little funny story. I was in Naples, Florida in February, and I was doing an event there. And I was sitting off to the side, and she was announcing me that I was, coming out in a minute. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm so disconnected. Like I have nobody. Like there's nobody here. There's nobody. Like what am I going to do? I'm going to get out there and just tell jokes. I don't know. And as soon as I stepped out, boom, there they were. It was like bing,
Wow.
bing, 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 bing.
Wow.
And I've learned that I just have to trust. If
Yeah.
you trust, they show up. Just
Yeah.
use me like an instrument. That's it. Use me like an
Yeah.
instrument. Come
Yeah.
out, and when I'm ready to work, they're there. If I don't
Yeah.
have to work, they don't bother. They don't bother me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the same and it's so different all at the same time. And it's that way with
Agreed.
everybody. It's
Yeah,
that way with
agreed.
everybody. I really want to thank you for coming on. That was like a very, very quick hour that we've shared. This has been wonderful. And again, ancestorhealingarts.org.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Check out Michael's website. If you want to book a session, please do, because I know I'm not the only one that has been completely fascinated by this conversation. And I'm so glad you came on when I chatted with you and said, well, how does that fit with what we're doing? But honestly, it was just brilliant, just brilliant.
Yeah.
And so I thank you for being here. I thank you for spending Wednesday evening with us and sharing, about what we do.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott, for having me on. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you and a real joy to be on the show. Thank you.
Yes. Do me a favor. Just hang out backstage for a couple of minutes. I want to say good night to everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Wednesday evening, and I will see you here again next week on Spirit Talk Live. Good night, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today for Spirit Talk Live with Scott Allan. Please remember to subscribe to Spirit Talk Live on YouTube and share on all your social media channels.